again, there's always that other lingering question, which isn't every division team's goal eventually to make it to MLS, or is there some sort of other system that we could set out without inciting the ridiculous P&R discussion, promotion and relegation discussion, about how NASL teams in the future might be able to get a wild card berth into the playoffs, or some sort of compromise where the two leagues are actually working together in some sort of partnership.
Yeah, I think each league is going to have their own needs that are specific to themselves, and there's going to be areas where it does make sense to work together. But really, the NASL is about providing the top level of professional soccer in their markets. In Indianapolis, if this NASL team is able to get off the ground, and if it makes sense for the investors, it's going to be not only the best level of soccer in the state now or in 2014, but really the best level of soccer in Indiana ever.
Right.
And that's saying something, and that's pretty exciting, and that alone is exciting and enough to stand on. I don't think the NASL or any of its individual teams really needs to worry about comparisons to other leagues, whether it's MLS or leagues that are abroad. And I will say that MLS is not out of reach for this market in the future. Mm-hmm. It's decided by these investors that now is not the appropriate time to go after that, and I support that vision. I think they recognize that proving itself as a professional soccer market at the NASL level is the best step and the first step that needs to be taken.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about earlier sort of this tribalism, the path to tribalism as far as building a supporters group goes. I think, you brought up Portland, and I think that's a really interesting example because I don't know if people know it, but there is a real sort of indie rocker, sort of alternative artist type, underground, not underground, in Indianapolis that's been growing for years. It's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and we see it in all the clubs in Broad Ripple and Fountain Square. And the interesting thing is a lot of those folks aren't typical sports watching folks, but as we've seen in Seattle and Portland, soccer is a different animal. People who don't really watch sports, actually, a lot of those folks can embrace soccer. And I think there's a big potential there. I don't know if you could speak to that and to the fact that we have a very large, growing Hispanic population in Indianapolis that would be, I think, strong supporters of a new team here.
I think it's very astute for you to recognize that, both what's going on in Portland and Seattle and how that translates to Indianapolis. And I think equally important is the success and development of that demographic in Kansas City and Salt Lake City. Those two markets you do not traditionally think of as indie, underground, alternative sport markets like you do with Portland and Seattle and maybe even Vancouver. But what's happened in the last couple of years with Kansas City and Salt Lake is phenomenal, and I think is proof that Indianapolis, which is a market maybe closer to Kansas City than Portland, although I see shades of both, as you demonstrated with whole Fountain Square, Broad Ripple, the university areas, that demographic absolutely would support a professional soccer team here. And that's very important. It's not likely going to provide the critical mass of numbers of support. I mean, if this team is going to, average the type of crowds that San Antonio is averaging, which is 8,000 average plus, it needs to be a combination, a broader demographic than just the young urban soccer supporter. It needs to also be the youth soccer family, the traditional demographic that has supported soccer in this country for decades. And the Indianapolis area is very strong. There are more than 60,000 registered youth soccer players in the area, and that's going to be critical to providing the numbers. You get the numbers. And so the relationships with the youth soccer clubs is going to be very important. But then when they go to the games, it's important that the experience is good. And part of that experience, frankly, is going to be the supporters making noise, waving flags, cheering, supporting the team, showing the interest is in the team itself. So it's not one-stop shopping. Mm-hmm. You really need everyone in the community, all the stakeholders coming on board to support this team.
And you bring up this kind of brings me to another point, which is there are a lot of fans out there in Indianapolis and all over in other cities who you might call them Euro snobs. They only watch the EPL or they only watch European soccer. And, that's actually changing. I mean, we're seeing some of these folks transforming or slowly evolving into domestic soccer fans as well. I don't know if you've looked into that as well, but how is that happening in some of these other cities?
Well, I think I wrote an article for a sports biz website in Australia a month or two ago about Tim Cahill's decision to play for the Red Bulls instead of going back home to play in the A-League in Australia. And I traced it back to David Beckham's signing. And I'm going to do the same thing with your question here. I think David Beckham's signing is the genesis of the Euro snob demographic, looking at Major League Soccer with more respect. And it wasn't just because David Beckham came. If it was just David Beckham, it would not have helped in the least with that demographic. In fact, it would have hurt because that group thought and still thinks that David Beckham was over the hill. He's coming here to retire. He was never that good anyways. So David isn't alone what changed that group's mind. But what happened is that David made Major League Soccer acceptable for other high-level players throughout the world to play in MLS, and they did. Mm-hmm. There are more than 50 designated players now in Major League Soccer or that have followed David Beckham's. And some of them have worked out great as ticket sellers. Some of them have worked out great as teammates and as players. Some have done both. But the end result is that the league is better and it has more credibility. More credibility with all factions of soccer supporters, including that group that you were referring to, whether you call them Europosers or whatever. That is a hugely important audience for MLS in American soccer because they are watching the EPL on Saturday mornings and Sunday mornings. Or in the case of the Latin American fans, they are watching the Mexican League or even the Brazil League or Argentine League. And so the soccer fans, the soccer spectators are absolutely there in numbers in the United States to be a mainstream sport. The challenge for Major League Soccer and North American Soccer League is to convert a number of those fans and spectators into fans and spectators of the domestic leagues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the other great thing when we're talking about fans here in Indiana, and it's something I wanted to bring up, there are soccer fans everywhere. In fact, Peter, when you were in Bloomington, we ran into some of them at the bar there. And so, it's not just about Indianapolis. The team, may be named in Indianapolis team, but I think we're going to see a lot of folks from Bloomington, from Noblesville, from Fishers, from Carmel, and all the outlying towns within an hour and a half drive who are, going to be just as excited about this team. How do you reach out to some of those groups in the sort of the Netherlands, if you will?
In some ways, it's easier to attract those groups. The further you are from an urban center, the less attention you normally get from a professional sports team. So if you do get attention, you'll get results. The local newspaper will cover you. The local service organizations will support you. And the fans will appreciate you more because they rarely get to experience a professional athlete in their midst. So it requires active community relations, strong efforts to get the athletes themselves out, whether it's a speaking engagement, a coaching session, autograph signings, giving away trophies at youth soccer tournaments. It's about just being among them. The best way, there's an article written by Dick Berg, who was an early editor of Soccer America in the 1970s. He wrote this article about the San Jose Earthquakes' attendance success, the original San Jose Earthquakes and the original NASL. And the article goes on to say Dick Berg was the general manager of, I believe, the general manager of the Earthquakes. He said that the key to their attendance success was getting the players in front of the kids. He says, once you do that, you have a fan for life. Yeah. The kids will remember that player, remember that experience, and they'll want to follow them to the stadium and watch the games. And in that sense, nothing has changed in 25, 35 years. What has changed is the medium. You can now reach those same potential fans online, whether it's social media or emails or virtual coaching clinics. You can reach out to them more easily and in some ways more intrusively and more intimately. And that's a strategy that must be embraced and actively worked to, because soccer's still not getting their fair share from the traditional media.
Right.
So soccer needs to rely on the alternative media. Although traditional media is coming around, it's not as inclusive for soccer as new media is. So it's imperative soccer teams take advantage of that.
Quite frankly, the new media itself is in its own more effective than the old media. I mean, while it's nice having your team on the front page of the newspaper, I don't know. I don't have a single friend who actually receives the newspaper, let alone reads it. They're on the website. They're on various websites. Whether it's on like the IndyStar.com's front page, that'd be something different. But they're focusing more on Facebook, Twitter, various other social medias, and that. In all honesty, that's probably the more effective way to reach out to the general public nowadays.
There's benefits, obviously, to both. It's not a zero-sum game. The real benefit for me, anyways, with traditional media is that it's still the agenda setter for corporate decision makers, whether it's the senior VP of marketing for Eli Lilly, or if it's the season ticket buyer as a CEO of a local company. They are going to be swayed by traditional media. If the soccer team is on the television news, on the front page of the Star, that's going to make a difference for them.
Yeah. Anything else that the fans and everybody else out there should know as we move forward?
It's important that support for this is demonstrated. And we haven't got to the point where we're doing things like taking season ticket pledges and starting petitions or anything like that. But we are at the point where it makes sense to start talking this up among your network. And if you have strong thoughts on what should be done or shouldn't be done, by all means, reach out to me. I'm available on Twitter at PeterWilt1. And let me know what your thoughts are. I'm happy to sit down with folks, as Brett and Derek both know, and listen. I'm not from this market. I need to hear what's important to the people that live here and would eventually be supporting a soccer team here.